Wolverhampton is a town with a long history. The original name, Wolverhampton, dates back to Saxon times and meant the high settlement. When the Lady Wolfruna decided to grant lands to the town's monastery, St. Mary's, the name changed to Wolfruna's Wolverhampton, which in turn evolved over the years into Wolverhampton. The church that she endowed 1,000 years ago later became St. Peter's. St. Peter's Church and the surrounding area are the focus of the modern town and feature strongly in the collection of films on this video. Wolverhampton's early wealth came from the wool trade, and later various trades connected to metalworking were established, including lock and key making, ironworking and the enamelling and japanning trades. Coal mining was also an important industry on the eastern side of the borough. By the end of the 19th century, the skills learned from these trades led to the town being one of the first to establish the manufacture of bicycles and all types of motor vehicles. This trade has disappeared from the town since the Second World War, along with much of the heavy engineering. The industries of the modern town are more diverse, although locks, keys and safes are still made. There are many sources that can tell us about the history and development of Wolverhampton, including the written records stored in the town's archives. A particularly evocative picture of the town's recent past can be gained from its photographic and film record. The films you'll see cover a period from the 1920s to the 1960s and offer a glimpse of a Wolverhampton that otherwise lives on only in the memories of its older inhabitants. It's a picture which is of necessity a partial one, as not all events and places were recorded in this way. It is, however, a powerful reminder of many features of the town's past. The earliest film in the collection held at Wolverhampton Archives is this recording of the Prince of Wales's visit to Bilston in 1927, when he came to the area to open the Birmingham New Road. It was made by T.R. Wood, a local JP and county councillor, who also ran a number of cinemas, including the Wood's Palace in Lichfield Street, Bilston. It's typical of much of the film in the collection, which was made to record events on special days. They show how such events were celebrated, and also, incidentally, generally give fascinating glimpses of the area, although in this case, it's difficult to pick out which part of Bilston is featured. The Prince of Wales travelled in a locally made Sunbeam motor car. Maps, such as this one made in 1750 by Isaac Taylor, also show how the town has developed and demonstrate that, although there's been much change, many features of the modern town were already present. St. Peter's stands then, as now, at the centre, and the focal point of Queen's Square can be clearly seen, although labelled with its original name of High Green. The film Rationalising City Transport was made by Osmond Wildsmith, the town's transport chief, in the late 1920s, shortly after trolleybuses had replaced the trams. It features trolleybuses made by Guy Motors of Wolverhampton and is designed to show how much more manoeuvrable trolleybuses were compared to trams. These opening shots were filmed in Victoria Street from outside Beattie's, looking towards Queen's Square. In the background is the Hippodrome Theatre, which was closed in 1956 following a fire and demolished a few years later. We're now in Queen's Square, looking towards Lichfield Street. Most of the buildings in this shot are still there. The original film features several towns that operated fleets of Guy Motors trolleybuses. This part of the film shows Birmingham, and demonstrates that Guy Motors trolley buses were perfectly safe up to speeds of 38 to 40 miles per hour. Although you may have noticed how close the bus was to colliding with a car as it left the depot. This section of film also shows a common sight on trolleybus routes, where the bus has come to a halt and the conductor is using a pole to reconnect the bus to the overhead wires. This piece of film was made on the 6th of May 1935, when Wolverhampton celebrated the Silver Jubilee of King George V. The whole town seems to have turned out to enjoy festivities, which began with a procession of local dignitaries from the town hall to St. Peter's, where they attended a service. Enormous crowds gathered in the market square. The next event shown is a march past in front of the town hall. Shots of Princess Square, Lichfield Street, Queen Square, Darlington Street and Victoria Street show how enthusiastically the town centre had been decorated for the occasion. A production of The Pied Piper took place at the Molyneux, home of Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club, watched by a large crowd. In the background can be seen the Molyneux Street stand and the open terraces of the South Bank. Vast crowds assembled later on at the Molyneux to watch a display by pupils from the intermediate school. Beacons were lit all over England. The local one was on top of Sedgley Beacon. A firework display took place in West Park, and in the town itself, people were able to admire the illuminations and the floodlighting of St. Peter's. This piece of colour film, titled Memories of August 1940, was made by the headmaster of Elston Hall School in Fordhouses. In that year, school summer holidays were cancelled all over the Midlands to enable parents to continue with war work. And in schools like Elston Hall, the pupils were engaged in special activities. The influence of the Second World War can be seen in the gas masks being carried into school by the staff and pupils, the horse-drawn vehicles on the Stafford Road beyond the gates, and the air raid drill at the end of the film. although many changes had taken place in the town centre, the basic road system shown on the map of 1750 was still evident, and was to remain pretty well unchanged until the end of the 1950s. Many roads, however, had been renamed. For example, High Green had become Queen Square, and Goat Street had become North Street. Live and Let Live was the title of the next film, which was made in the early 1950s. It's one of 3 films from this era which are all concerned with road safety, and the complete film includes reconstructions of road accidents. The opening sequences show the large amount of traffic which caused severe congestion in the town centre even at that date. The traffic lights featured here in Princess Square stand on the site of the first set of automatic traffic lights set up anywhere in Europe. They were originally set up as an experiment in 1927 and were permanently installed a short time later. This shot shows a part of the town we've not yet seen. It's the very busy junction at the bottom of Snow Hill. One of the buildings shown is the Gaumont Cinema, which stood opposite the library. It closed in 1973 and was demolished a year later. In the centre of Queen Square, you can see the entrance to the underground toilets built in 1902 and covered over in 1992 with a statue of Prince Albert, the man on the horse, in front. The scene changes to the grammar school on Compton Road, where the reconstruction of an accident involving a cycle demonstrates how the emergency services worked. Note the number of the police car. The second film with a road safety theme shows the opening of the road traffic training ground at St. Christopher's Park, Low Hill in 1951. It was designed as a place where children could practice riding their bicycles according to the highway code. It was supervised by the police and included working traffic lights. It was known locally as the Penny Park, as it cost a penny to hire one of the cycles if you didn't have one of your own. The third film in this sequence shows a cavalcade of transport travelling along Chapel Ash and through the town centre. Although the theme was road safety once again, the procession also featured historic vehicles, some of which were made in Wolverhampton. The next two films were made by the Education Department at the end of the 1950s, before major redevelopment took place in the town. Both of them feature school children visiting sites of interest around the borough. The changing scene opens with a view across the outdoor market towards Gifford House, a view which would look very different today. The Molyneux Hotel, originally the townhouse of the Molyneux family, who made a fortune from the iron trade. The hotel closed in 1979 and stands today as little more than a shell, although it is a listed building. The top of Victoria Street, showing the furniture store in Queen Square, which was built on the site of the old Hippodrome Theatre, and moves into Queen Square, giving a closer look at the Prince Albert statue, which was unveiled by Queen Victoria in 1866. Resulting in the renaming of High Green. A local myth, long disproved, tells the story that the sculptor Thomas Thornycroft, after seeing that the legs were incorrectly positioned on the completed statue, committed suicide. Alongside St. Peter's can be seen the Wolverhampton and Staffordshire Technical College, built in the early 1930s. The next area shown is Queen Street, showing several of the town's early public buildings. Including the Mechanics Institute, later to be the Army Information Centre, and the Public Dispensary. the town's first hospital, which was replaced in 1849 by the South Staffordshire General Hospital, now the Royal Hospital, in Cleveland Road. When the old dispensary closed, the building was used as an orphanage for children whose parents had died in the cholera outbreak of 1849. The Central Library was built to celebrate Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee and opened in 1902. Looking across Garrick Street, behind the library entrance, you can see the site of the present Wolverhampton shopping centre. St John's Church Tower is a prominent mark on the Wolverhampton skyline. The church was consecrated in 1760 and stands in St John's Square, one side of which was demolished in the late 1950s to make way for the first section of the town's ring road. Work started early in 1960, and the section from the top of Snow Hill to the Penn Road was opened in 1961. The open view extends down to the Dale Street Flats, the first high-rise blocks to be built in the town. Back in Victoria Street, we see the half-timbered building occupied at that time by Lindy Lou's, which sold items for babies and children. Nearby, in St John's Street, we see the pupils pass the original grammar school building on the left-hand side, which was then occupied by Steen's Printing Works. Looking from the bottom of Snow Hill into Dudley Street, there's a view towards St Peter's, which would be obscured nowadays by the Wolverhampton Centre. The first building we see in Dudley Street is one of the public houses left over from the days when Dudley Street contained many coaching inns. This one is the Coach and Horses. Further down, near to where the C&A store is situated, is the Swan and Peacock Hotel. Originally, this was the Peacock, and the Swan stood on the site of the present Midland Bank at the opposite end of Dudley Street. When the Swan was demolished in 1877, the Swan figure was moved to this pub, which was renamed the Swan and Peacock. This is clearly the entrance taken by the coaches. The new retail market opened in 1960. The second of the two films made by the Education Department was called Out of Darkness, a reference to the town's motto. It begins with a shot taken from the top of St Peter's Tower, looking towards Penn and the outskirts of the town. We see a trolley bus turning round at the Penn Road terminus and follow it back into town along the Penn Road. Passing the Star Aluminium Works, Wolverhampton Die Casting at the bottom of Graiseley Hill, and pausing to take a close look at the Midland Counties Dairy Building at the junction of Lee Road, now the site of a McDonald's drive-in. Finally, we arrive in the town centre by way of Worcester Street and Victoria Street. The scene moves out of town to Aldersley Stadium, opened in 1956, showing the cycle track and the original cinder running track. The view from the stadium takes in the 4 chimneys of the Courtaulds factory, the grandstand at Dunstall Park Racecourse, and Oxley Railway Viaduct, with the Stafford Road Gasworks in the background. Following this sporting theme, the scene shifts to Molineux Stadium, showing the stand erected over part of the south bank since we saw it last in the 1935 film. The clock, clearly seen above the Molineux Street stand, is now positioned on the stand colour stand in the recently much improved ground. After a brief look at the West Park, we see shots of the Civic Hall, built in 1938, followed by a visit to the original retail market in North Street. Once again, at the top of St. Peter's Tower, we follow the skyline looking towards Bilston. The scene moves to the Birmingham New Road. The first building the children look at is the GKN Research Laboratory at Lanesfield. Nearby at Parkfields, they visit St. Martin's Church, consecrated in 1939. The cooling tower in Commercial Road is viewed from Steelhouse Lane, near to the Monmore Green factory of Bayliss, Jones and Baylisses, one of the oldest established metalwork factories in the town. One product that they were noted for was intricate iron railings and gates, such as the one pictured here. Bayliss, Jones and Baylisses later became part of the GKN group. From Monmore Green, the film follows the canal back to town, passing a coal merchant before showing another view of the Commercial Road power station. On the way back to town, we see the Royal Hospital and the Cleveland Road Bus Depot, opened in 1902. After a brief look at the Maryhill Five Ways, there's a view out towards Bushbury. The children arrive outside St. Mary's Church at Bushbury. Travelling along Bushbury Lane, they passed the Goodyear Tyre Factory, established in 1928. It was one of the town's biggest employers in the 1950s and still is today. They passed the factory belonging to Guy Motors, the firm who made the trolley buses featured in the first film, before returning to Bushbury Lane and following the railway line into the town centre, arriving at the Broad Street Canal Basin next to the railway stations. Back at St. Peter's, they look down from the tower at the wholesale market and outdoor market, where the Civic Centre now stands, and move around the central part of the town. The film finishes with a view of St. Peter's Gardens and Lichfield Street. The next film once again focuses on a royal occasion. Called A Day to Remember, it records the events of the 24th of May 1962, when Queen Elizabeth visited the town. The visit attracted vast crowds into the town centre to celebrate the first visit by a reigning monarch since Queen Victoria came in 1866. The Queen arrived by train at the low-level station to be greeted by the mayor and was driven through crowded streets. Arriving at the Molyneux, she presented new colours to the South Staffs Regiment, apologising for damaging the turf with her high heels. After leaving the Molyneux, she drove to the grammar school to mark the occasion of the 450th anniversary of the founding of the school by Sir Stephen Jennings. The school had moved to the Compton Road site in 1875. The head prefect, William Rees, presented the Queen with a copy of the history of the school. After which the assembled pupils, led by the headmaster, Mr. Ernest Taylor, sang the school song. She was then driven to the Civic Hall for a reception, passing enthusiastic crowds lining Chapel Ash, Darlington Street and North Street. At the Civic Hall, she was presented with a powder bowl made at the Art College. After leaving the Civic Hall, she went to Wensfield to open the community centre. Wolverhampton into the 70s was made by the council to show the changes that had been made to the town during the 60s. One of the major changes was the demolition of much of the town's older housing to make way for new developments like the Blakenhall Flats. Children from St. Luke's Primary School visited the site to watch the progress being made with their construction. People were amazed at the views from the top floors towards the Clee Hills in Shropshire. Sir Keith Joseph, the Minister for Housing, performed the opening ceremony. Back in the town centre, major redevelopment was taking place to create a new shopping centre. Among the casualties of this were the town's two Victorian shopping arcades. The Queen's Arcade, which stood on the corner of Queen's Square and Victoria Street, and the Central Arcade, which ran from Dudley Street to St John Street. Many Wolfrunians still regret their disappearance. The new Manda shopping centre provided a striking addition to the town's skyline. It has itself recently undergone modernisation. Alongside the Manda Centre, the Wolfram Centre. Returning to maps of the town, we can see how the main roads all led to the centre, causing the severe congestion clearly showed in the film taken in the 1950s. The solution was seen to be a ring road, a major undertaking which involved the destruction of large areas of the town. The project was started in 1960 and only completed in 1986. Many people regret that so many of the town's older buildings were demolished and question the wisdom of constructing the road so close to the town centre, feeling that it's not really achieved the desired result of keeping through traffic away from the town centre. At the time that the film was made, further redevelopments were being considered. The original plans involved the demolition of more public buildings, including the Central Library and Town Hall, but fortunately, these were never fully implemented. Plans to develop a showpiece civic centre did go ahead, and it was opened next to St Peter's in 1979. By the 1980s, attitudes towards buildings had changed. Hence, the 16th century Lindy Lou building underwent a major renovation to reopen in 1981 as the town's consumer advice centre.